As it stands, we really don't know the fate of Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive coordinator Mike Smith. The Buccaneers did decide to keep Dirk Cutter after a failed attempt to get John Gruden, who is now on the Oakland Raiders on a 10-year deal worth $100 million. Congrats to John Gruden. That's a lot of money, and there's no way that I could see the Glazers paying for that. But it has raised another question, is now that they are keeping Cutter, and apparently Cutter is keeping his play-calling abilities, what does this mean for Buccaneers defensive coordinator Mike Smith? Statistically, the Buccaneers had one of the worst defenses this past season, the one that we just had, and according to Pro Football Outsiders, they also had one of the worst efficiency ratings as well. So quite frankly, they were one of the worst defenses in football. So what went wrong? Well, one could argue that the players didn't execute well enough. Quan Alexander, I know, had a very bad season. Vernon Hargreaves had a very up and down season. Justin Evans looked very good in my opinion. Levante David looked very good in my opinion. Gerald McCoy looked very good in my opinion. So those are three levels of the defense that looked pretty good, at least with one player. Chris Conte played good in some stretches. However, the constant rotation of safeties didn't necessarily work out. TJ Ward didn't have that good of a season, but he also did not have a lot of time to adjust and adapt to Mike Smith's defense, a very hybrid-esque defense. A lot of people complained about corners playing off the ball, which was true for some situations, yes, but also not true for others. Also, injuries was not helping out the Buccaneers under any situation, under any circumstances. Mike Smith was without arguably his best pass rusher in Noah Spence, who tore his shoulder after, I believe, week 3. It was out for the rest of the year. That's a big deal. That brings up questions about Noah Spence's ability to remain healthy. I think this is the second year he's gotten injured now. So does he get bigger? What do we do to make sure to have Noah Spence healthy? We also had William Golston dealing with multiple injuries this year. We had a couple of cornerbacks dealing with injuries this year. Specifically, Vernon Hargreaves did get injured for certain bits of time when he wasn't having an up and down time. After that, Ryan Smith came in. Ryan Smith was not a very good corner. He did have some moments where he looked good, but all in all, he didn't look that good. Robert McClain was out for certain stretches. When he was in, he looked about what you would expect, average. Javian Elliott came in and looked okay. I mean, I don't really remember a lot about Javian Elliott, to be honest. So you could also cite a lack of talent there. Robert Ayers wasn't exactly wowing anybody with his pass rushing capabilities, nor was William Golston. You had a couple of guys brought in, like Ryan Russell, like Frank Clark, who didn't necessarily perform that well. Chris Baker certainly didn't perform that well, as a lot of people have been stating. He was shown to be very lazy, very not good in general. Specifically for the contract that we gave him, he didn't look very good. So there could have been a certain lack of personnel there, at least on the defensive line. And a lot of people have been saying, well, if you give Mike Smith a defensive line, he will do better. And we don't know. I guess we'll find out. Because as it seems right now, Mike Smith is staying. But there's a lot of good things that are. There's a lot of good reasons to keep Mike Smith, but there's also a lot of bad reasons. Yes, we had a lot of injuries on the defensive line, and yes, we didn't exactly have the best personnel on the defensive line. We were rotating ends, we were rotating defensive tackles. If it was up to me, I would have been playing Clinton McDonald and Gerald McCoy exclusively on 3 downs and do that. But I get it, you have to rotate players. Players get tired. You were also without 6th round pick Stevie Tukulavalu, or whatever his last name was. I apologize. You were without Noah Spence. You were without Vernon Hargreaves for certain stretches. You were without Brent Grimes for certain stretches. He was injured for a little bit. You had a safety who, around a $5 million safety who didn't know the defense that well because he didn't have a lot of time to learn it, and he's expected to be your starter. So it was rough. Honestly, I didn't necessarily agree that much with the rotating safeties bit. I feel that you could have started Justin Evans and you could have started Keith Tandy and things would have been fine. But he did anyway. We're past it. Again, you guys know how much I hate rotating players. So really, what do you say? What do you say? Yes, Mike Smith didn't have that good of talent on the defensive line minus Gerald McCoy. And Robert Ayers didn't perform this well. William Golston didn't perform that well. Obviously, Noah Spence was hurt, but you signed those guys to contracts to warrant them performing well, and they obviously didn't do well. So is that Mike Smith's fault, or is that Jason Light's fault? We honestly don't know the answer. There's a reason that we gave William Golston around $7 million a season, right? There's a reason that we gave Robert Ayers a pretty decent contract for a player of his caliber. The linebackers performed well between Kendall Beckwith and Levante David. I thought that they played very well. Yes, Quan Alexander didn't perform that well, but still, he's shown that he can play well when he needs to. You had Justin Evans playing pretty well. Justin Evans, I thought, played good. He was probably the best safety out of the bunch. Chris Conte also had a better season than most give him credit for. I'm not necessarily on the loving Chris Conte wagon, but I'm also not on the hating Chris Conte wagon. I thought he performed well, and he really did play his heart out. So what's the problem here? And should Mike Smith stay? Well, I think the problem obviously is with our defensive line. We need to get more defensive linemen, like I've been saying for weeks now. We do need to get more defensive linemen in, and I'll be making more videos on that topic later. But I also believe that part of this is Mike Smith's fault. One of Mike Smith's jobs is to create pressure. Obviously, cornerbacks cannot cover wide receivers forever. You need to create pressure, and you need to make the quarterback make decisions quickly, and sometimes that quarterback might not make all of his decisions correctly quickly. So that's how you force turnovers and fumbles and things of that nature. With more pass rush, you can knock the ball out of the quarterback's hands. That's a turnover if you recover it. You know, if you force the quarterback to make a bad decision quickly, that's another turnover. That's an interception, or that's a knockdown pass, and you can force a punt with that kind of scenario. I wouldn't necessarily say that Mike Smith had the best personnel to work with, because quite frankly he didn't have the best personnel, but he could have blitzed more. That would have helped. Blitzing would have helped out a lot, and when he did blitz, it seemed to be ineffective. So again, I don't know if that's on Mike Smith or that's on the personnel, but I will say our linebacking core was pretty decent. Our cornerbacks weren't terrible. Yes, they did have some stretches of injuries, but all in all, it wasn't that bad. And safeties, I thought, played better than a lot of people give them credit for. So really, Mike Smith, he didn't create enough pressure, and he didn't have the pieces, I guess, to create enough pressure. But should he stay? I honestly don't know. His defense was very up and down his first year he was with the team, with Dirk Cutter. So that's not exactly a very glowing endorsement here. But I do think he could make it work if he had the right pieces. But what is the fate of Mike Smith? I honestly do believe that Mike Smith is going to stay with the team. If you look at the quote that's been above my head the entire video, this is what Dirk said when asked about having his coordinators leaving the team, or whether or not his coordinators would be staying on the team. The question was, will your coordinator stay on the team? Dirk said this above. I would think so, but the one thing I've learned in my time is to never say never. That's obviously leaving the door open that Mike Smith can leave. Obviously, Mike Smith had head coaching opportunities last year. He did interview for the Giants head coaching job, and he's obviously going to be in that conversation for other head coaching jobs, being a former NFL head coach himself for the Atlanta Falcons. But honestly, if you want my opinion of it, I really do feel that Mike Smith is going to stay the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive coordinator for this season, and we're going to continue to see this more of a hybrid-esque defense. And really, we look for the Buccaneers to get Mike Smith more pass rushing weapons. You have Noah Spence there, but he hasn't proven yet to be capable of remaining healthy for an entire season. And yes, you have Gerald McCoy, which Gerald McCoy is awesome, and Clinton McDonald, I feel, is a very good second option next to Gerald McCoy, but you need more. You need defensive end help, and Robert Ayers and William Golston. I honestly don't know what to tell you about those two right now. We have them on contract. They're not going to go anywhere unless we decide to cut ties with them, which we might. I honestly don't know. But really, you've got to ask yourself the question on whether or not you want Mike Smith to stay or whether or not you want Mike Smith to stay is, were William Golston and were Robert Ayers and were Frank Clark and were Ryan Russell the caliber of players to make Mike Smith's defense work, or did Mike Smith not have good enough players to make his defense work? It's really up for debate, and if you want my opinion, in terms of defensive line, I would say no, Mike Smith didn't necessarily have the people to make his defense work the way he wanted it to. But also, in that same vein, it's Mike Smith's job to generate pressure. He could have blitzed more. That would have helped out a lot. I don't know a lot about football, But if you want pressure, sometimes you have to blitz. I know that. I could be dead wrong. Again, I don't know a lot. But I know Mike Smith didn't have the defensive line talent that he probably needed. And I know he probably didn't have the cornerback help he needed. Vernon Hargreaves is a pretty decent, he's pretty average. Like right now he's probably slightly above average cornerback. And Brendan Grimes is pretty good too. But they can't cover everybody forever, you know. If the quarterback has all day to throw, then of course he's going to have a good game, you know. So really it comes down to making sure Mike Smith this upcoming season, if we do decide to keep him, which in my opinion I do believe we will, it's going to break down until we need to get Mike Smith's, we need to get pass rushers for Mike Smith's defense. And if he stays, we've got to rally behind him and just say, all right, Mike Smith, show us what you can do with some good pass rushers. Because honestly, if we stay the course now and don't sign anybody or draft anybody, then I honestly don't know what to tell you, because we were dead last in sacks. That's really bad. And again, you could very easily argue that Mike Smith didn't have the talent. And I will also, I've been calling for Mike Smith to be fired for a while, but recently I've just kind of accepted it. Mike Smith's going to stay, and we've just got to accept that more than likely. But let me know what you guys think about the whole Mike Smith situation down below. And if you want my opinion, would I like to see him fired? Honestly, yeah, I would still like to see him fired, but will he be fired? Probably not. And yeah, I'm sure the owners are thinking that he didn't have enough defensive line help, but you could have blitzed more. You had linebackers, you had corners, and you had your safeties. All those levels, the linebacker level did fine. I feel like the cornerback level could have done better, but it wasn't that bad, and the safety level was honestly not that bad either. So really this falls on the defensive line, and it's just another scenario of Gerald McCoy being all by himself. But if it was me, I would honestly fire Mike Smith, or at least pray that he gets a head coaching opportunity, because I still don't really want Mike Smith on the team that much. But if he stays, okay, whatever, you know. But let me know what you guys think about the whole Mike Smith situation down below in the comments. I'd love to talk with you guys about it. And as always, guys, I will see you in the next video. But until then, goodbye for now, guys.